Delighted to be here. Thanks everyone for coming along. I'm Sean Driver from the National Adult Literacy Agency, and I'm here with my colleagues Chris Carthy, who's an Adult Literacy Ambassador from Sligo, and my colleague Aoife, who's a Policy and Research Officer in ALA. So we're going to divide up our time in kind of three ways. Chris is going to kick us off a little bit and talking about her experience going back to education as an adult, just to kind of give you a bit of insight about like literacy and like the need for clear information in this area in a very practical way. Then Aoife is going to talk about like the stats and the figures and give you some advice about like keeping your message clear in a kind of general way. It's valuable things there. And then I'm going to look at doing some practical tips. And we have a workshop later on this morning. So we're going to, introduce the topic a little bit at the end, and then we're going to hopefully get into it in more detail with some examples later on this morning. So yeah, I can see Chris there. So Chris, how are you doing today, Chris? Are you there? Still muted, Chris. Can I unmute you? Let me see.
Yeah, maybe someone can invite Chris to unmute.
I don't have that power. Is that possible, Jane? Is there a button you can press to invite Chris to unmute?
Yes, I just invited him to unmute.
Yeah, I think that's it, is it?
That's it, Chris. That's it, Chris.
Sorry about that.
No worries, you're grand. What's the weather like in Sligo this morning?
Gorgeous. I can't wait to get out in it.
Yeah, fantastic. So Chris, thanks for coming along today. And yeah, just like you went back to education as an adult, and I just want to talk about like your experience going back and like why you think like what was that like for you, Chris, going back to education as an adult?
Well, I was 46, and yeah, it was very scary. Um, the reason why I went back is because I felt stupid and I didn't like people reading papers or not really knowing what was going on in the world and have no confidence. So I went back to school, and after about a year or so, I got more confidence. And after the second year, I was flying. I loved it all. I started doing maths, and I always worked in healthcare, so people with special needs. And so I decided to do healthcare. So I would done level 3, level 4, and level 5, and passed them all. And I did level 5 a second time and passed it also with merits and distinctions. Yeah, so I was really into the health. And once you get your confidence, I mean, you feel you can do anything. Well, I felt I could do anything. So, and I achieved a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when people ask you your story, you feel you've, like people that were asking me stories after a while would come back and say, well, look, I have a problem. Or people I went to school with that see me on TV or see me on Facebook, whatever, would come to the house, would find my number, ring me up and ask me where can I go for help. And so I felt I also had helped a lot of people. So, and I'm still learning now, like if there's a quiz or something that has to be like a word search or anything like that, I go mad until I have it done. And it's great for helping with spellings, especially big spellings. So yeah, I can read to my grandchildren and go and see them. I can now use the computer. Not before, I'd never have been able to get through to you, but now, it's just a little bit of you say press this, do that. I was told the other day, somebody asked me, do you talk to your grandchildren? And I said, yeah, I Skype them. And she said, that's so old fashioned. I couldn't believe it. I said, why is Skype? They don't call it Skype anymore. Us older people do. I don't know what they call it, but she said, they don't, it's not Skype anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I can do emojis with them. So they do little clowns on their faces. So I have the same thing there. So I can do smiley faces and they change their face, and that's all. I love all that. So mad about computers now and the new phone.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I mean, I think like I always talk about confidence when I'm doing training sessions, and I think like what you talked about there, like I remember another adult literacy ambassador, Michael Duffy, talking about like being feeling fit to do things. So like the researchers who are here today, they might be trying to like reach people who, maybe very good at very skilled at reading, maybe, a bit nervous at reading. Like what would you have any advice for the team if they were like trying to just reach people to get them involved in their research?
Well, I think because nowadays it's not as bad. I know the fear is there,
Hmm.
but I think what pushed me the most was banking and having to pay bills, never sure of what I was doing. Um, and of course, NALA, they would allow you to speak in the group.
Hmm.
That really helped. And then I start putting myself into, like, when say if I was socializing, just for coffee with friends,
Hmm.
not talking, I would talk up because they might be talking about, oh, did you see in the paper? Or did you read about this one and read it? And that's where the confidence comes. Say, oh yeah, I'd be so excited about the piece and everyone was listening. And I was like, this is great, But it's normal for lots of people, but
Hmm.
wasn't normal for me. So once I start talking up, or the situation where I went to the bank and the girl wasn't so nice,
Hmm.
and she said, "No, we don't fill in forms here. That's not what we're here for." And I said, "Well, I can't read and write, so unless you do something for me, I just have to take my money out and go somewhere else." Oh, she said, "I beg your pardon. I didn't know." Well, I said, you know, so we go
Yeah.
start. Should we start again? She said, "I'm truly sorry." So
Okay.
it was a matter of having to at that stage, And once it came out that first time, it was
Hmm.
great. And actually, there was a lot of support then from the on post. Absolutely, I
Great.
could go in there and ask them to fill in. Them of your sending off or what you call it, with money on it. Oh,
Like a transfer or something like that, or like a
yeah.
payment. Yeah.
And I'd be like, and they were lovely. I actually told them what was going on, and every time I come in, they all knew me. They'd all say, "Chris, and what do you need?" Said, "Do you want something? You sure you have all? Everything's okay, whatever." And actually, one girl asked me if I ever needed help. Here's her phone number. Just
Okay.
ring me and I'll spell the word for you. So, because I was great at writing letters, I was writing letters to everybody then. So, but get yourself in a place where there's other people, like even
Hmm.
that you not talk normal with your family, but get yourself in places with your friends and small little sentences. Even start off that way,
Yeah.
build it up. That's what I think. Well, that's what I did anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, I mean, I think that's great, Chris. I mean, we have like a time for a question and answer at the end, but if any of the researchers want to ask Chris a question about experience or fair communication or literacy, I'm sure Chris wouldn't mind taking a question if you want to, Chris.
No, not at all.
Um, yeah. So Chris, just stick around, and then we're gonna Aoife's gonna chat now for 10 minutes, and I'm gonna talk for 10 minutes, and then there might be some questions at the end that people might have. So yeah,
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
thanks so much,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you.
Just gonna hand over to Aoife.
Great, thanks, Sean, and thanks, Chris. That's so important,
Bye.
I think, to hear that like real world experience before we start getting into facts and figures that can all seem a little bit impersonal sometimes. So thanks, Sean. So yeah, listen, I am the research and policy officer with NALA and going to just quickly run through the numbers and kind of where we are at with literacy in Ireland at the minute, and what kind of like social factors those are associated with in the latest research. Then thinking about, well, how, I suppose, where really these things apply. So where do you guys need to be thinking about literacy? Like when do you need to be applying plain English principles? And I suppose the key point there is it's not just at the end whenever you're trying to like tell the public about the results of your research. It's kind of, you can be thinking about this the whole way through the process. So Sean, would you mind flicking on? Thank you. Yeah, so listen, Chris is very much not alone in having experienced like literacy challenges in Ireland. So the latest figures from the OECD show that 21% or one in five adults in Ireland would have literacy needs. Now, what precisely that means is that they are at or below level 1 on a 5-point scale. And we're talking about adults aged 16 to 65. So we only have 10 minutes, so I'm not going to go into all those details, but if you're interested, you can click in there to the CSO's web pages on this, and they're very good sort of explainers about what do the levels mean in practice. But essentially, if people are at or below level 1 on the scale, they would have challenges with an everyday life. The kind of things Chris was talking about, like forms, banking, that kind of thing. So the survey looks at literacy, it looks at numeracy, in which 25% or 1 in 4 adults in Ireland have a need or a difficulty. And they also look at adaptive problem solving, rather nebulous concept, which I'm not going to go into too much, because the OECD just made it up for this particular survey. But it's over 1 in 4 as well. So essentially, I suppose the takeaway is there are more people in Ireland than you might think who may struggle to take part in or to read about research. Next slide, please, Sean. Yeah, and so sadly, this is probably not unexpected. Like having a literacy or numeracy need is linked with all kinds of sort of inequalities in our society. So older age is strongly correlated with having lower literacy and numeracy. Sure, it might be of interest to this group in particular, having a worse health status. Again, we're not talking about causality here, but it is interesting to note that if you've worse health, you're more likely to have worse literacy and numeracy. If you don't speak English as your native language, you're likely to have a lower literacy score. Numeracy is not affected, and that is accounting for the fact of people not being able to speak English. So like they do account for this, even though the test is run through English. If you yourself have lower educational attainment, or indeed if your parents have lower educational attainment, so we find these things are like intergenerational inequalities. It's correlated with being unemployed. It's correlated with being just outside the labour market in general. And also, if you are employed, you're more likely to have lower income. So yeah, thank you, John. So a big thing here, I suppose, you might want to consider is if there's sort of major like literacy hurdles for what you call it, your study. You may be accidentally sort of leaving out people who are particularly marginalized and associated with those factors. So it's worth bearing in mind how that can introduce potential risk of bias in your sample. And of course, you just want to reach more people in general. Like get your numbers up, of course, for getting people into whatever your study might be. So these are just some areas you might think about. So your study design in the first place, like if you're sort of asking people to fill in a long, complicated form at the start of the study, do you have to do that? Does it have to be in writing? Could you ask people these questions in person or on the phone? Sometimes people these days use a lot of like with digital portals as well, like apps and things. Again, is that necessary? Is it as easy to use as possible? Do you just don't want to be creating a barrier accidentally that'll like put people off from being able to participate in your study? Whenever you're promoting, trying to like tell people that they could sign up for this, you want to use a variety of media. I'm thinking here like audio visual media, like kind of I think the classic sort of like notice there's a flyer or a poster. That's all well and good and keep doing that. But you might consider things like videos on social media, any kind of audio formats that you can use are really useful to reach people who maybe have any kind of difficulty reading. Your participant information sheets, you want to have those in as plain language as possible, and I believe Sean is going to cover maybe a sample or two of those in the workshop. So if you're interested there, digging into what that might mean in practice, like what are the tips for writing these things in plain language, you can check out the workshop later. And the surveys as well. I'm sure people think about this because you're strongly incentivized, obviously, to have a survey that nobody can like misinterpret and have your questions clear and unambiguous. I suppose the point there is that these things benefit you as the researcher. It's not just even about getting more people in. It's also about that you're going to get better data back if you have really thought these things through, have a very clear research question, very clear surveys, very clear information to participants. There'll be no confusion from people. So it's worth your while as well. Thank you, Sean. So yeah, when it comes to writing up your research, okay, why do you want to do this? You want to make your reader's job as easy as possible, and also help other disciplines understand your findings. Like even from researcher to researcher, of course, there's different jargon, there's different sort of technical terms, if from one discipline to another, and we know everyone's all about interdisciplinary research these days. So these principles can help you to maybe make connections, to have other people from other disciplines actually be able to understand what it is that you're talking about. So in your abstracts, I mean, you can always ask yourself, can I make this simpler? I just really don't think it's a place for trying to look fancy. It's a place for that is where you're saying very, very clear terms to even a general reader, what is my research all about? And a good exercise could be to get somebody from different discipline or someone who isn't in research at all to like read over your an abstract and say and be like, do you understand what this is about? Could you tell me now what this paper is about or what my research is about? Really useful exercise to do. Visualizations, obviously, you want them to be nice and clear, accessible in terms of like sort of visual disabilities. I personally like to do 1 point per visualization. Now, it doesn't always work out with space, etc. But if you think about it, like what the visualization is saying should be pretty clear from like a few seconds of looking at it. And if it isn't, do consider splitting it up even into like two different charts, this kind of thing. Because I think sometimes we try to cram everything into the one graph and make it look very, I suppose, complex and full of information, which is great. But if it takes you 5-10 minutes to sit and work it out, is it that effective as a visualization? I don't know. Listen, and then there's points around layout, making things clearly laid out and your language to be, I suppose, your terms well defined, acronyms spelled out, etc. But I know Sean's going to go into that detail, so I will ask Sean to please skip on to the next slide and not keep you too long. And yeah, then the third area, last but not least, where you want to be considering like plain English principles and like literacy needs is when you're communicating with the public. So you can reach more people and have kind of get your research out there that it might actually have real world impact in terms of like affecting policy or like practice in the healthcare system. So just to say, and these are some thoughts on where this might help you, like when you're writing online content, magazine articles, press releases for the media, if you're prepping for a media appearance, an interview, a podcast, anything like that, thinking through your points very, very clearly. And last but not least, yeah, your briefings for policymakers. Like if you want to be really changing the way that the healthcare system is run, like you're talking a 1 or 2 pager for a busy minister or civil servant, that is really, really crystal clear as to what the import of what you have found is, and how they should apply it. So I'm going to hand over to Sean now, who can I think tell you a bit more about. Now I've talked about where you should do it. Now Sean's going to do the how.
Thanks, Aoife. Unless anyone has some really difficult
Oh,
questions to ask Aoife now, they're very welcome to ask them or wait
very
till the
welcome.
end. Okay. I have a difficult question for you for later. That's all right. Perfect. Okay. So the top 6 tips, folks. So yeah, we'll do 5 minutes on this, and this will kind of introduce the, when we're writing something, whatever it is, whether it's an email to a potential participant, whether it's a patient information sheet, whether it's like our plain language summary, whether it's our abstract, I just want you to take on board some of the principles. But I want to make you work for a second, folks. So in the chat box, what I want you to do is like, what's your top tip for keeping your message clear? It can be a big thing or a small thing, but just can everyone just write one thing they think is important for clear communication? Just put that in the chat for me, if you don't mind. I'll give you 30 seconds. Find the chat, and then what's your top tip for keeping you're keeping a message clear? Exchange. Lovely. So we're seeing some similar things. We're seeing different things. It's good. Like that point, Sheila. Yeah. So these are the kind of philosophical things. like Sheila's philosophical point about writing as if I'm teaching myself for the first time. And then, you know, just keeping things short, no jargons. Um, Descriptions using more words rather than one complex word. That's a good one, Neve. So yeah, lovely. Okay. So I think we all have a good idea, folks, of what like clear writing looks like. How do we do it? So for me, the top 6 tips, like the first one is that kind of empathy point. It's like, who are our readers? Can we speak directly to them? So whether it's, you know, healthcare professionals, maybe we have to write to them in a certain way. If it's members of the public, maybe a different way. So that's just think of your audience. If they say if you're writing for the general audience, if you're aiming for a you know, the mass public, you should like kind of tailor it for a reading level that's kind of at kind of just junior cert level. So that doesn't mean you're writing to junior cert students. It means that you're writing to, you know, people who would feel comfortable reading kind of you know, a reading level of kind of 14, 15 year old. And that's like, you know, think about newspapers and like tabloid newspapers having a bigger circulation or social media. You know, things are kind of tailored for a reading level that's kind of if you know kind of the A1 to C1, C2 kind of structure, it's kind of B1, B2. It's kind of intermediate level of English. So just think your readers. We'll talk about using the active voice. So I know, folks, that you've been trained for the last 20 years or however long you've been in academia to use the passive voice a lot. But when you're trying to, you know, reach the public, it can be a good idea to use a bit more active voice to say, you know, we are doing this and you can do this. So when possible, running for the public, try to use a bit more of the we and the you and just being direct using the active voice. We'll look at that in more detail. We'll talk about using everyday words, the words of your readers, cut jargon, and explain technical words. So the idea here, folks, is not that you have to dumb things down. It's just have to recognize that not everyone is as familiar with like your discourse as you are. So I just think it's like think of yourselves as like what your point there was, Sheila. You know, teaching it to yourself for the first time. That's a good way to look at it. The way I like to boil this one down, folks, it's cut the fluff, explain the stuff. So that's my little mantra: cut the fluff, explain the stuff, and I'll be saying that a few times. Um, Keep sentences short. So, you know, on average, 15, 20 words. Sometimes you might have a 5 word sentence. Sometimes you might have a 30-word sentence. But the idea is just like every word should be meaningful. And if you can, you know, cut 3 words for 1 word, that will make a big difference. So can you keep things short? And then like, can you use the inverted pyramid writing? So naturally, folks, you do this. Like the inverted pyramid writing just is how journalists structure their articles and their, you know, communications on the radio. And, you know, our emails, we structure them using the inverted pyramid writing with a subject line. And the idea is like if you're writing an email to a colleague, you don't just want to say like say invitation. I want to say invitation about projects deadline, you know, 30th of May. So the idea is you're kind of like front loading the key information. So if the person just reads the subject or just reads the first paragraph, they'll get you know, as much of the relevant information as possible. So it's like what journalists use to structure their headlines, their first paragraphs. And then it can be a good technique to use, like if you're putting together a video or you're putting together anything, it's like, you know, what's the hook or what's the thing that's going to draw people in? Yeah, so the top 6 tips. Oh yeah, I forgot the last one. Using white space, headings, and bullets. So, you know, if you have a big block of text and it's you know, can be quite off-putting. So can we use some more headings to help find information? Can we use some bullets to break things up? And can we use some more like just negative space, like short paragraphs? When you're scrolling online, folks, and you're looking like at the news, like say you're looking at the RTE news or another provider of news, you'll see that they're using such short paragraphs nowadays. So just like you can see that. We'll look at it in the workshop. Yeah, so this isn't so much a research example as much as a kind of just an example from a big, powerful organization who try to reach people. It's from what we call the DSP, the Department of Social Protection, so like welfare. So what I want you to do here, folks, is I want you to kind of analyze it for what's making it hard and how can we improve it. So this is the Department of Social Protection's website, and they have this part here about these are their top 5 web pages. And you can see you have customer feedback. Then you have this one here, access officers on the Disability Act 2005. Okay, but like, why would anyone ever be clicking onto that? You know, okay, I'm gonna think about that question. And then when we click into it, folks, we get to this page here. So we have this access officers on the Disability Act 2005. And really quickly, folks, what I want you to do is just have a read through that. And I want you to tell me, like, it's always good to say what's strong about something, and there's lots of strong things about it. Just for the purposes of our little workshop here to introduce it, like, what's making this hard? Just have a read through that, and in the chat box, tell me 1 or 2 things that are making that hard. Yeah, Marion, that's an excellent point. Marion, do you fancy unmuting and just making that point aloud? Because I think that needs to be said. Just can you expand on that, Marion?
My point when I started reading it was that it said the department had a team of officers in accordance with the Disability Act,
Mm,
and that they were around the country and they're responsible for this and that. It didn't tell me, like, it didn't ask me if you have a problem with your pension or whatever it is. If you have a problem with your pension, have a look at this, see this, or whatever. So I
yeah,
had no clue. It wasn't front loaded with the information like you were suggesting.
exactly. So um, yeah, so that's it, folks. Like that kind of disposition of like, so like sometimes we're so deep in our research and we think this is the key point, and then you have to kind of step back from and think like actually the key point is just what you said, Marion. It's like if you need support, you can contact our access officers, not the legislation, not the fine detail. It's the main thing. So like just taking the plain English guidelines on boards, what you would do is like how our access officers can support you. Then you're flipping it from being about the acts and the law to being about like what's user centered, because organizations talk about being user centered and putting users first, but like how do you do it? Well, if things can be very helpful, like if you're in this situation, you can do this, and giving examples, and then using short subheadings: how to request support, how to make a complaint, relevant legislation. So what we'll do, folks, in the workshop is we'll look at a couple of examples that people have sent in, and we'll kind of analyze them together. And the idea will be like, oh, this is really strong. What's strong about it? How's it using plain language guidelines? And then if we have any suggestions, we can share them with each other as well. So that's what we're going to do in a workshop in a little bit. So hopefully that has been helpful.